Caleb McRae saw her from a distance. A body unusually large lay face down in the grass, a living corpse. As he drew closer, his heart sank. It was a tall Apache woman, muscular and solid, a body once forged for survival, now forced down to the dirt. Both of her ankles were tied tightly to wooden stakes, the coarse rope digging deep into her dark skin. Her upper body was pulled forward, shoulders trembling with each heavy breath. On her thigh, a smear of blood had dried, dark under the sun, mixed with dust and crushed grass. Caleb took one more step. She jolted, her entire body tensed by instinct, like a trapped animal still ready to bite back. Her eyes flew open wild, not with rage, but with a fear that had long since carved itself into her. Her voice broke out, hoarse and shattered. "Do not dot, it still hurts there." Caleb froze. He did not touch her. He did not speak. He did not move closer. Only the wind stirred the ropes, making a dry, whistling sound, like the desert's warning. In that moment, Caleb understood. He did not need a story. He did not need clearer signs. This was no accident. This was punishment deliberate, carried out by someone who believed they owned her body. Caleb slowly stepped back and laid his knife on the ground, within her reach. Then he turned away and stood as a shield against the wind, so the Apache woman would no longer have to endure another gaze. In the vast emptiness of the desert, that silence was the first act of kindness she had been given in a very long time. Caleb McRae stood with his back turned, eyes fixed on the horizon shimmering under the heat. Behind him, he heard the sound of rope scraping against skin, and labored breaths held back, as if the woman refused to let herself groan even one more time. He did not rush her. He did not turn around. He said nothing. The wind swept across the desert, carrying the scent of dry grass and earth, and the faint trace of blood baked into the sun. Caleb placed a water flask on the ground, then a clean, neatly folded piece of cloth. After that, he slowly stepped farther back, leaving enough space for her to make her own decision. It took a long while before he heard the faint clink of metal hitting the ground. The knife. She had taken it. Her hands were large, muscles clearly defined, but trembling with exhaustion and pain. Each cut was slow, deliberate. The rope came loose from the first stake, then the second. When her ankles were finally free, her body collapsed into the dirt not from weakness, but because she no longer had to hold herself up. Caleb still did not turn around. He heard the water being uncapped. The sound of gulping rough and urgent at first, then slower. After that came a long silence. Not a threatening silence, but one like a room finally closed off after a storm. Only when he heard a faint, deliberate cough did Caleb slowly turn. The Apache woman was sitting back against a patch of dry grass, spine straight, head held high. She had wrapped the cloth around her thigh. Pain still lingered on her face, but her eyes were no longer wild. They were alert, sharp, the eyes of a warrior who had never forgotten who she was. Caleb gave a small nod. He walked over to the horse, removed the saddle, and lowered the reins. When he turned back, he did not touch her. He only shifted his body slightly, giving her the space to stand if she chose to. She tested her weight on her legs. Her knees buckled slightly. Caleb extended his arm just halfway, waiting. A beat. Then she placed her large hand on his arm. No clutching. No clinging. Just a steady grip. A touch at the right moment. Her body was heavy and solid, but her movements were controlled, full of pride. Caleb helped her onto the horse, step by step, always keeping just enough distance. Once she was seated firmly, he handed her the reins first, a silent gesture of acknowledgement. No one said thank you. No one asked names. They turned their backs on the place that had bound her, and began heading toward the ranch, where the wind still blew, but this time, it no longer forced anyone to bow to the dirt. Caleb McRae's ranch sat tucked behind a low ridge of rock, where the desert wind eased and the sand no longer lashed straight into your face. The old wooden house carried the smell of kitchen smoke in every plank. There, time moved slowly, like an old man who no longer rushed through life. The Apache woman sat on the front step, her back resting against a wooden post, legs stretched out before her. Her body was large and solid, muscles still defined even in exhaustion. Caleb placed a bowl of water beside her, then stepped back, giving her space of her own. In the first days, they barely spoke. Only small sounds filled the silence. The crackle of wood in the fireplace at night, the horses snorting in the corral, the wind slipping through the gaps in the door. She ate very little, slept sitting up, her back against the wall, as if lying down might drag her back to a place she could no longer name. It was on the third day, when the sun had finally softened, that she spoke. Her voice was deep and low, steady, but each word landed heavy as stone. The one who tied her up was not an enemy, not a stranger. He was her husband, a well-known warrior in the Apache community, a man spoken of with respect, discipline, and traditional values. He talked about order, about a wife's role, about how a strong woman needed to be straightened out so she would not bring shame to the family. She did not say much, no vivid stories, just enough for Caleb to understand. The wooden stakes were not a moment of madness. The rope was not used in a burst of anger. It was his way of reminding her that her body belonged to him, and that resistance would be crushed beneath the very rules their silent community upheld. Caleb did not interrupt. He did not offer comfort. He did not make promises. He simply added more wood to the fire, keeping the flames steady but never too high. She said she had endured for a long time, not out of fear of pain, but fear of isolation. But one day, when the ropes tightened and her face was pressed into the dirt, she understood that if she stayed, it would not just be freedom she lost. It would be herself. She ran before dawn, carrying a body marked with wounds, and a decision that could never be undone. Caleb looked at the Apache woman before him, not a victim brought low, but a warrior who had chosen to break her chains. Out there, the desert remained vast and merciless, but inside the old wooden house, for the first time, her story was spoken without being cut off. Thank you truly for being here with me. Let us know where you are listening from. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel to support me. I wish you peace and happiness wherever you are hearing this story from. On the fifth morning, the wind changed direction. Caleb noticed it not because of the weather, but because of the silence. There were no birds. The horses in the corral stood still, ears pricked forward. It was a familiar feeling in the west when someone was coming, but had not yet shown their face. They appeared at the edge of the ranch just as the sun rose over the ridge of rocks. 3 men on horseback, stopping at a distance far enough not to be trespassing, but close enough to send a message. They did not bring war. They brought rules. The one in front spoke first. His voice was even, not angry. He talked about bringing the woman back to where she belongs, spoke of tribal order, said this was not the business of an old cattleman. Caleb stood on the porch, one hand resting lightly on the wooden post. He did not argue. He did not send them away. He just listened. They mentioned the husband, never by name, only as the one with the right, said he was being shamed by his wife's absence, said things would stay peaceful if she returned before rumors spread too far. The Apache woman stood behind Caleb. She did not hide. She did not bow her head. She heard every word. Jaw clenched. Her large fingers closed and opened again, as if reminding herself she still had a choice. When the second man spoke, his voice heavier, talking about what would happen if she kept being stubborn, Caleb could feel the shift in the air. It was not violence, not a direct threat, but the weight of an entire community pressing down on one person, trying to force her back into silence. Caleb stepped forward half a step. "She is injured," he said, his voice rough, slow. "She is not going anywhere." The man in front looked at him, his eyes measuring. "We are not asking your opinion," he replied. "We are informing you." Then they turned their horses and rode off, leaving dust in their wake and a message left unspoken. This was not over. That afternoon, the Apache woman asked Caleb one question. What if they come back? Caleb did not answer right away. He looked out across the field, where fresh hoofprints still marked the earth. "I cannot fight an entire tribe," he said, "but I will not hand you over to anyone." She nodded, a quiet thank you. That night, Caleb sat at the wooden table, pulled out paper and a pen. He wrote slowly, each word heavy as stone. He did not know if the letter would ever be read, but he knew one thing. From that moment on, peace was over, and the choice had been made. Night settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket. Wind slipped through the cracks in the wood, carrying the dry chill of the desert after a scorching day. The Apache woman sat near the fire, her large hands resting still on her knees. The flames cast an orange glow across the fading marks on her ankles. Caleb McCrae sat across from her at the wooden table. He did not look at her, not out of avoidance, but because he understood some decisions had to be made alone, or they would become burdens carried for someone else. He took out paper and a pen. His old hands, worn and calloused by time, paused for a long while before writing the first word. He knew he had no promises to make, no authority, no law on his side, only an old debt a life once saved in a long-ago winter, when another man never got the chance to say thank you. Caleb wrote slowly. No long stories, no drawn-out explanations. I am giving shelter to someone who has nowhere else to go. If you remember that snowy night, I ask you to stand up not for me, but for the right to choose. He folded the letter, sealed it with care. Outside, a lone wolf howled in the distance, thin and long. Caleb stood, put on his coat, and began saddling the horse for a night ride. The road to town was far, and there was no guarantee the one meant to receive the letter was still there. The Apache woman stood when she saw him fastening the saddle. You do not have to do this, she said, her voice deep and steady. Not a protest, just an acknowledgement. Caleb paused. I know, he said. But if I do not, then everything ended the moment they turned their horses this morning. She looked at him for a long time, her eyes no longer guarded, not yet trusting just the quiet understanding between two people who had been pushed to the edge in very different ways. Caleb rode off into the night, leaving the ranch in silence. The Apache woman stayed behind, sitting alone, spine straight, eyes on the fire. She did not pray. She did not plead. She simply waited not to be saved, but to see whether her choice would be honored. When dawn broke, Caleb returned. He brought no answers, only the truth that from this point forward, there would be no turning back. The letter had been sent, and with it, the fate of them both had crossed the last line of safety. Cameron appeared under the noon sun like a scar across the desert. The main street was choked with dust, weathered wooden rooftops fading into the heat, the sound of horse hooves and voices blending into a harsh, restless noise. Caleb McCrae led his horse slowly, not seeking shade. He knew that today, avoiding things would only make them worse. The husband stood in the center of the square, tall, wearing a carefully tended leather coat. His face was calm, his voice smooth, every word chosen as if for an audience. He spoke of honor, of order, of how a man could not let his wife disgrace him before the community. The crowd listened. Some nodded. Some stayed silent. No one stepped forward. Caleb stood at the edge, arms at his sides. He did not interrupt. He did not expose the truth. He understood. If he spoke for her, the whole thing would turn into a battle between two men. And once again, she would be pushed to the background, just like all the times before. The Apache woman stepped out. Her frame was large, solid. The old marks on her ankles were still faintly visible. She did not hide them. She did not bow her head. Every step she took was slow and steady, as if the ground beneath her feet was the only thing she trusted. The crowd whispered. Some eyes were curious. Some were judging. Some were afraid of a woman who refused to stay where she was told to stand. The husband turned to her with a thin smile. He spoke gently, like coaxing a child, said it could all end peacefully, said she only had to come home, said he would forgive her. Caleb saw her shoulders tense. One deep breath. Then she stood taller. He did not step forward, did not gesture. He stayed still, offering her the only thing he could in that moment, the space to choose for herself. The square fell silent. Wind stirred the wooden signs, making them creak. The husband waited, confident that the crowd and old habits would pull her back. But she did not look at him. She looked straight ahead, toward the road leading out of Cameron, where the sun still burned and the desert remained vast. A decision was held tightly in her chest, not yet spoken, but already irreversible, and everyone felt it. Something was about to break. The Apache woman took a deep breath, not to gather courage, but to keep her voice steady. She turned to look at her husband one last time. There was no hatred, no pleading, only the gaze of someone who had seen everything clearly, including the cost. I am no longer your wife, she said. Her voice was deep, steady. Each word dropped into the square like stones breaking the surface of still water. The crowd stirred. Some mouths opened to speak. Some heads turned away, as if unwilling to hear. The husband froze for a brief beat, just one. Then he smiled. That same familiar smile, the smile of a man who believed his power could bend any words back into place. You are disgracing me, he replied. Come home. There is no need to make this loud. She shook her head just slightly. I have come home too many times. She stepped to the side toward Caleb McCrae. She did not take his hand. She did not lean on him. She simply stood beside him, shoulders squared, chin held high. A public choice, one that could not be taken back. The entire square seemed to hold its breath. The husband looked at Caleb, eyes darkening with anger at being denied something he had always believed was his by right. He took a step forward, ready to say something. But then came the sound of hooves from behind the crowd. Marshal Rudd appeared, coat dusty, face weathered by sun. He did not shout. He did not read out long laws. He simply stood where all could see. "She has spoken," Rudd said. "And here, that word carries weight." The husband turned to Rudd, about to argue. But the crowd had changed. No one spoke in his favor. No one stepped in. This silence no longer stood with him. The Apache woman looked her former husband in the eye. "I choose to leave," she said. "And I choose this man not because he is stronger, but because he does not see me as something to be bound." He stood there, humiliated, not because he was defeated, but because he was rejected, in front of the very people who once believed in him. Caleb said nothing. He simply stood firm, as he had from the beginning. When they turned their backs and walked away from Cameron, there were no cheers, only dust rising behind their steps, and a choice made, not with fists, but with a final no that could never be taken back. They left Cameron as the sun dipped westward. No one followed. No one called them back. Only the wind swept across the dirt road, and the shadows of two people stretched long across the sun-baked ground. Caleb McRae walked half a step ahead, not to lead, but out of the habit of a man who had lived alone for too long. The Apache woman walked beside him, her pace slow but steady. No one forced her to bow anymore. No rope bound her ankles. They said nothing the entire way back to the ranch. When the wooden house came into view beyond the low ridge of rock, the desert felt a little less harsh. The wind still blew, the sun still burned, but the sense of being chased had faded. The Apache woman paused on the front porch and took a deep breath, as if, for the first time, allowing her lungs to fully expand. The days that followed passed slowly. There were no promises, no grand declarations, just small things: fixing the fence, drawing water from the well, lighting the fire at dusk. She worked with a body that had once been bound, but now moved by her own will. Caleb did not tell her what to do, and she did not need to ask. At night, they sat on opposite sides of the fire. The flames lit different scars on her skin and in his eyes. No one asked about the past, but both understood what it meant to have something taken that should have been yours by right. One evening, she spoke first. She did not mention her former husband. She did not speak of rituals or ropes. She simply said that, for the first time in a very long time, she could sleep without waking at the sound of the wind. Caleb nodded. He did not say that he could too. Time did what words could not. Shared meals became natural. Silence grew lighter. Understanding deepened, not loudly, not needing to be named. They did not build a home with vows. They built it with a choice, repeated each day: to stay, to respect, and not to bind each other with fear. The desert was still there. The pain of memory had not vanished completely, but in the middle of that harsh land, a home had been built, not out of power, but by two people who had learned how to stand upright again, side by side. The story you just heard contains some fictional elements, recreated with the help of artificial intelligence, not to distort history, but to help us reimagine a piece of the old American West, a place of harshness, choices, and consequences. Through these moments, I only hope to share a few simple lessons about kindness, love, and courage, truths that still hold meaning even today. It is truly wonderful to have you here. I just wish you peace and happiness, wherever you may be. We may not be young anymore, so please take good care of yourself. There is a truth that becomes harder to deny the longer we live. Not everyone needs to be saved through action, but everyone needs to be respected through space. Many people believe courage means stepping in, speaking up for others, making decisions on their behalf. But most of life's tragedies begin exactly there. When you rush to help, you may unintentionally strip someone of their right to stand on their own. And when a person loses the right to choose, sooner or later, they lose themselves. It is like looking down from a height. When you are high enough, you see the whole landscape. You understand why the road twists, why the river does not run straight. But if you stay too close to the ground, all you see is the dust, the trash, the small collisions that make you react with emotion instead of understanding. In life, many conflicts do not need you to win. They need you to stand firm, not to shout louder, but to be the quiet place someone can lean on. A strong man is not someone who controls others. He is someone who can control the urge to control. When you give someone enough safety to say no, and enough respect to decide for themselves, you do not make them weaker. You help them grow stronger in the most lasting way. And here is the paradox. When you do not hold someone down, they stay. When you do not impose, they believe. When you do not claim them, you truly earn them. A man's honor is not measured by how many people stay beside him, but by how many choose to stay, not because they are afraid, but because they want to. That is a kind of strength no one can take away. Comment with number 3 if this story spoke to you. And do not forget to subscribe to support me. Best Wild West stories.